Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to welcome you to today's webinar, Countdown to Business Blast Off, Ignite NetSuite. My name is Olivia Johnston, and I am the Assistant Account Executive here at FMT Consultants, and I'm joined by Paul Clayton, our Senior Practice Director. Before we dive in, for those of you who aren't familiar with FMT, I'd like to take a few moments to give you a brief introduction of our company. Here at FMT, we have successfully completed over 1,000 projects. We have been in business since 1995 and recently celebrated our 20th year anniversary. We are Southern California's leading provider of Microsoft integrated solutions and have over 230 clients in both the United States and Canada. Our team has significantly grown over the years, with currently close to 80 team members both in northern San Diego as well as Los Angeles. At FMT, we pride ourselves in our 5 core values: integrity, service excellence, collaboration, innovation, and passion. But why choose FMT? With a combination of talent, experience, and methodology, we are fully dedicated to the success of your company. We offer a wide array of services pertaining to ERP, CRM, SharePoint, BI, and Office 365. In addition to having extremely experienced consultants, we also have a dedicated help desk that offer ongoing training and support after projects are completed. Not only do we pride ourselves on our product expertise and multiple offerings, but we have won a handful of awards, including Best Places to Work as well as multiple small business awards. Here are just a few of the clients we get the privilege to work with on a daily basis, and of course, one day we hope to add your company to this list. Now I'm going to hand it over to Paul, but before I do, if at any time during the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the comment box. We will be monitoring it during the entire presentation. Thank you. Paul?
Okay, thanks, Olivia. Appreciate that. Again, welcome everybody. Appreciate your time in joining us today. So we're going to be talking about, as you can see on the agenda, the NetSuite application. NetSuite and its unified platform provides a single solution, again on a unified platform. We'll discuss NetSuite One World. With the NetSuite One World configuration, really NetSuite can be run in sort of 2 different ways. It can be run in a single instance with one company, and then it also can be run within a single instance with multiple subsidiaries, and that's where One World comes into play when you have multiple subsidiaries or legal entities. So we'll be focusing quite a bit on that today. Within the One World environment, you have shared master records. So we'll talk about what types of master records are actually within the One World environment. Intercompany processing, so lots of different ways that you can actually process intercompany transactions through general ledger transactions, purchase order and sales order type intercompany transactions, as well as different types of project time and expense intercompany transactions. We'll also talk a little bit about consolidated reporting and then consolidated KPIs and scorecards and just ways to be able to effectively and efficiently report within One World environments. So just talking a little bit about today's landscape relative to the solutions that are out there. So what we see a lot are maybe 3 to 5 different systems that are integrated with middleware, as you can see on your screen. What that might lead to is a lot of troubleshooting of integration issues and that kind of thing. It also leads to some frustration in terms of having to export data from multiple systems, getting multiple spreadsheets, and then having to consolidate that data to actually get your report. So with NetSuite, what we have is improved collaboration, as we've got all the different roles within your organization that are running on a single unified platform. So with that, we've got a single source of data, and we've got one version of the truth for all the roles that you see on the screen. Another differentiator with NetSuite is it's got customer, vendor, and partner centers. So this allows for great interaction and collaboration with your customers and your vendors and your business partners to be able to dial in and really get controlled access to the business solution. Those partner centers are a key aspect of the solution, as I mentioned, and we've seen them used in many different ways. Okay, kind of talking about NetSuite One World. As I mentioned, the NetSuite One World solution is a multi-entity or multi-subsidiary type solution. It can be configured from a global perspective, so we may have separate entities that represent different regions throughout the globe. Or you may have it configured to represent just different legal entities or different companies that all report up or consolidate to a parent company. So what does this do for this? Well, that gives us global operational efficiency relative to our processes and procedures. Because we're under a single unified platform, it gives us real-time visibility and consolidation in terms of rolling up our data. Comprehensive multi-currency management, operating in many different currencies, role-based access and dashboards. So depending upon what my role is, like we looked at on the earlier slide, I have access to certain types of data and can see that in real time through dashboards that we'll look at a little bit earlier. And it still gives us flexibility so that we can operate as our own entity or our own subsidiary with a unique operation, but still remain part of a consolidated picture to drive controls. So if we look at NetSuite World and kind of think on some of the additional benefits. So what has this given us? It really drives consistent processes across the subsidiaries, helping with predictability, as I mentioned, helping with control and processes. It enables global compliance from an accounting and audit standpoint, so that we know that each one of our legal entities or our subsidiaries are doing things the same way. And like I mentioned, provides real-time global business insight. Just a couple other statistics on NetSuite One World type installations. The number of countries in which it's deployed are about 160 plus across North America, Europe, and Asia. It's a very widely deployed type of solution, the NetSuite One World solution is. Supports 19 different languages. So if we, as we're getting into the application a little bit earlier, if we look at some of the preferences on a user basis, I can very easily switch between different languages, English and Spanish, or available languages that you can view the application in. And then the number of currencies that supports that NetSuite supports are 190 plus, so almost 200 different currencies are supported by the NetSuite application. All right, so let's take a look at the application. We can actually jump right in. So we'll be looking at the latest release of NetSuite on version 2016.1. Something to just note from a NetSuite perspective, there are 2 releases per year. So you usually see for 2016, we'll see 2016.1, and then we'll see 2016.2 coming out in the latter part of the year. Okay, so jumping into the application. Give me 1 second so we can just see if we can switch over here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and, from a role-based perspective, we're going to log in as the controller. Talk a little bit about navigation. So here is the NetSuite homepage for the controller role. See, there's lots of different components to the homepage. So we have at the very top, we have menus that are kind of drop down and roll right menus. So if I want to get to a particular component within that menu, I can drop down and roll right and select my income statement, for example. You can see there's several different portlets. So I'm moving the reminders portlet around here within the home page. So the portlets really serve 3 purposes. They provide for easy navigation throughout the application. So I can access certain shortcuts from the portlets. They provide access to KPIs. As you can see over here on the left, I have different types of information relative to how the business is doing, and I can tailor that information that's available to the specific role that's logged in. And then we can also post reminders. So in terms of the workflow and how things actually move through the application, we can help facilitate workflow through the reminders that we get for our processes and the things that we need to do on a daily basis. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in now, move from the controller role to the Americas CFO role, because I want to talk a little bit about subsidiaries. So as I mentioned, NetSuite One World applications or configurations are multiple subsidiaries within a single instance of NetSuite. So I think the best way to see that is visually up here on the screen. We can see that we've got a hierarchy of our subsidiaries. Subsidiaries, again, can be locations of the business throughout the different regions of the globe, or they can actually be specific legal entities from a business perspective, all rolling up into a parent company or a holding company or something of that sort. NetSuite allows up to 75 subsidiaries to be configured. You can also configure elimination subsidiaries so that month end we can run our elimination entries to ensure we're not overstating certain account balances. And then really the hierarchy of the subsidiaries, the ones that you see here, really define the reporting structure and how things roll up within the organization and within the application. We can control user access at the subsidiary level. So if a particular user should only have access to the Canadian subsidiary and only interacts with the Canadian subsidiary, then we can control that through the user access. Okay, so lots of different functions available in terms of really kind of opening up the application to operate across multiple legal entities or subsidiaries in the One World environment. All right, so let's go ahead and jump back into our slide. And talk about shared master records within a One World environment. So one of the ways that the NetSuite One World configuration helps things stay very efficient is through shared master records. So this allows us to create different shared master tables, such as the ones you see on your screen. GL accounts, accounting dimensions, and by accounting dimensions I mean things like departments and classes, those different dimensions that you might slice and dice your data by when you're doing reporting or you're entering transactions within the system. You can also share vendors. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the shared vendor capability because it really is an extensive functionality within the application in terms of being able to share vendors across the application. And then items, we can also share items. You can share employees as well, so employees can have access to multiple subsidiaries in the solution. But these are probably the ones that we'll kind of focus on today, just to make sure that we kind of cover those basic functionalities off. Okay, so as you can see on the screenshot here, I've got an item, an assembly item, bill of material item that's up on the screen, and over here under the subsidiaries, each one of my subsidiaries are listed, and then we can actually either select certain subsidiaries, or I can select the parent and then just include children for giving that item access to all subsidiaries within the app. All right, so switching back over to NetSuite. If we go over into, let's take a look at GL accounts for instance. I'm going to go ahead and switch my role again. So coming over to my roles, I'm going to log in as the administrator and get a little more access relative to the different subsidiaries. So if I first off pull up a GL account, so I'm actually going to just pull up the form to create a new GL account. We can see here I can create my account, name the account, and then assign that account to one or more subsidiaries, or the parent, and then just include children so that that GL account has access to all subsidiaries. So really enabling that shared record across the different legal entities within the organization. And then we can set the different type for the GL account and currencies, indicate whether or not this is an intercompany elimination account, so that it can be properly treated as we're posting transactions to it and going through the month-end process. Okay, so if we look at different dimensions that we were talking about earlier relative to departments, locations, and classes, specifically departments. If I pull up the department list here within the application, I'll grab the marketing department, we can view that record, and we can see that the marketing department is assigned to the Gillink headquarter subsidiary and is including all children. So if we throw that into edit mode, it actually gives us a little bit better picture of all the different subsidiaries that the department field has access, or this department value has access to. So all the different subsidiaries that we saw a little bit earlier in the visual hierarchy that we were looking at. Okay, we can do that from both a department standpoint as well as a class standpoint. So your classes, or perhaps your profit centers within NetSuite. If we look at one of those, let's pull up a particular class. So we do maybe seasonal sales here for one of our revenue streams, and again we can see that this class has access to all subsidiaries and the parent subsidiary and all the children within that hierarchy. So when we're entering transactions and we're processing certain things within NetSuite, we're able to assign those transactions to any subsidiary from a class perspective. Okay, and then that allows for roll-up within our financial reporting. So we can also do that for items. So if we jump into the items screen, so we'll go ahead and pull up let's go ahead and create an inventory item. So that screen's taken a little bit to come up. Here we go. So we can actually create our item, and then just as we could for GL accounts, departments, and classes, we can assign one or many subsidiaries to this item, so it can be shared across different subsidiaries. So if I pull up a particular item that that's been set up in the system already, this gives us a good idea of how an item here is allocated or shared across two different subsidiaries. So we've got this item, our STP mounting bracket, is shared across the US 1 subsidiary as well as the Mexico subsidiary. And then again, any transactions that we process, purchase orders, sales orders, any of those types of transactions can be processed for this item and against those subsidiaries. So as we talked about a little bit earlier, we've got shared vendors across subsidiaries as well. I'll go ahead and pull up a vendor, pull up the Amazon vendor. Let's drill into it. A lot of functionality from a shared vendor perspective within the NetSuite One World environment. So here you can see I've got my main information relative to the vendor at the top, address information, and down below I have different subtabs that are available, one of them being the subsidiary subtab. So if I put this vendor record into edit mode, this allows me to actually add additional subsidiaries to this vendor record. So I have a primary subsidiary and then secondary subsidiary, as well as, if I want to add this vendor to all subsidiaries, I certainly could. So a lot of feature functionality in terms of master records from a vendor perspective. So as you can see, we can assign secondary subsidiaries to the vendors. Vendor balances can be maintained, so let's cancel out of this screen. And if we come back into the vendor in the non-edit mode, then we can see that the balance for that particular vendor is shown, the unbilled orders, that particular subsidiary. If I had multiple subsidiaries and this vendor was being processed, transactions were being processed in multiple subsidiaries for the vendor, then I could see that information across all the subsidiaries from one place, the master vendor card. You can also maintain credit limits for vendors, so they can be maintained globally, but then also viewed at the subsidiary level and maintained at the subsidiary level. So ultimately, this allows for better control in terms of just consistent processes, reducing spending, better visibility as far as your vendors and suppliers go when they're shared across multiple subsidiaries. Ultimately, shared vendors means all of that activity for that supplier or for that vendor in one spot. So I can see all the related records, all the transactions, and I can go back to my vendors and potentially negotiate better rates from my suppliers because I've got everything in one spot. So for the shared vendor capability, the One World configuration is required, but it's a core function of the One World environment. So as soon as that One World environment is turned on, then shared vendors is there. It's ready to go. You also have the ability to, I think this happens to everybody, you end up with multiple vendors within the solution. You have the ability to merge vendors. So if I throw this particular vendor back into edit mode, and I come over to the Actions drop-down window, you can see we have a merge function. So we can take all of the information relative to this vendor and we can merge it into another vendor. The nice thing about this merge function is it's available to us even if those vendors are assigned to multiple subsidiaries. So we can consolidate the vendor balances and merge the vendor balances if we need to, even if we've got that vendor existing in again, multiple subsidiaries. So really some great feature functionality in terms of ensuring that we keep our vendor list clean and as accurate as possible in terms of that that shared vendor concept. So if you think about how or where I can apply these this functionality from a shared vendor perspective, we've got a lot of options. So we can actually, aside from the vendor record that we've looked at, we can apply this shared concept to the vendor center, the vendors, and the vendor roles. So we can really customize in terms of granting access to a vendor center to certain subsidiaries. We can specify different vendor item prices per subsidiary for the same item record, so it really flows into some of your approved vendor lists and supplier item pricing. If I'm processing requisitions within the application, we can use the primary and secondary vendors that are assigned to the subsidiaries down here. If we're processing purchase orders, vendor bills and vendor payments, and vendor credits, also RMAs. So if you're processing RMAs, we can actually utilize this shared vendor capability from an RMA perspective. And then checks and journal entries. If you're noting specific vendors within a journal entry, you can certainly select a subsidiary there as well. So a lot of capability in terms of the functions throughout the system for shared vendors. Something I also like to mention from a shared vendor perspective is there's a suite solution called Shared Vendor Bills. So if you have expenses that are shared across departments or subsidiaries, this solution actually allows you to set up distribution schedules for expenses that might be common throughout the organization. And then those distribution schedules kind of define the allocation percentage for each legal entity or department. That allocation percentage can actually be overwritten at the line item level on a vendor bill. So you're not in terms of what you've set up from an allocation percent perspective or from a distribution perspective on the schedule. But when the vendor bill is approved, the system generates journal entries for the interdepartmental distributions or the intercompany distributions across the different subsidiaries. So it really gives you some flexibility there in terms of your shared or your common expenses. The journal entries they're also reversed, and new journal entries are created if you update or delete lines on your transaction, like your vendor bill. So if you make changes to that, then you certainly can rely upon the system to synchronize those changes. So that's the shared vendor bill functionality. If you have questions about that, certainly let us know, and we can help you out there. Okay, so enough on shared vendors. As you can see, there's quite a bit of functionality there. Let's go ahead and jump back into our slide deck. And talk about intercompany. So some of the intercompany features that are available within the NetSuite One World configuration. So we can process intercompany journal entries, intercompany sales and purchase orders, which is a very interesting one, and we'll kind of focus a little bit on that one because the intercompany sales and purchase order function really kind of highlights the capability of showing the different interactions between subsidiaries for different types of transactions. You can also process intercompany inventory transfers, and for all of you professional service organizations out there, you can process intercompany time and expense entries. So if you have a particular project within a given subsidiary, but you have resources that span multiple subsidiaries, we can have transactions for those project resources from a timesheet and an expense report perspective. They can post transactions to that project, even though all those resources may exist within different subsidiaries. So a lot of intercompany functionality there from a NetSuite perspective. So let's go ahead and jump in and look at some of that functionality. So if we go back to NetSuite, so I'm logged in again as the administrator. Let's jump back home to our home page, and we'll navigate to our intercompany journal entry. So this is a basic general ledger intercompany journal entry. So no new surprises here in terms of the functionality. We define our subsidiary and then our two subsidiaries, so we get our interaction between the different subsidiaries. Right? And then we can go ahead and put the detail relative to those specific subsidiaries down below as far as the debits and credits and utilizing the intercompany accounts. So as I mentioned, we also have the intercompany sales order and purchase order process. That's the one I'm actually going to process a transaction with, because that's got some functionality where it really, as I mentioned, kind of shows that that interaction between different transactions from an intercompany perspective. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and use our sales order form. So let's launch that. So in terms of where I'm at and setting some perspective and context, I'm actually entering a sales order as the U.S. subsidiary for one of my U.S. customers. So I'm going to go ahead and put in one of my U.S. customers. So we'll select 3M. Okay, and we'll put in our 3M purchase order number for that particular sales order. We can assign a project to that sales order if we need to. So coming down here, we can see that the subsidiary that owns this particular transaction is, again, the US 1 subsidiary. Okay, so my 3M customer has contacted me, and we'll just go ahead and use the STP mounting bracket that we looked at a little bit earlier. Pops up some little information relative to what we have available at a given location for this sales order, and what's on order, what's on back order. So we can acknowledge that, come through, and we're going to go ahead and sell these units at $5 a piece with an expected ship date of sometime within the next week. Okay, let's go ahead and add that line item and save off the transaction. So what we've done, or just give you some background, some setup that I've done already on this particular item is I've set this item up with a default vendor, and that default vendor is actually my GIL Inc. Mexico subsidiary. So the Mexico subsidiary is going to help me procure this product. As you saw, we didn't have any in inventory, and then they're going to help me fulfill the sales order as well. So what that did when I submitted that sales order to the supplier that represents the Mexico entity is it actually put that transaction into my intercompany sales order queue. Oh, I don't see it here. Let's jump back into that sales order. So something I forgot to mention a little bit earlier in terms of our navigational purposes, there's off to the left, there's an icon called my recent records icon, and it allows me to jump right back into that transaction that I had, or that I was just looking at. You can also pull up that transaction through the global search function here. So if I knew that sales order number, I could put the sales order number in and pull it up that way as well. What I forgot to do was go to that line item on that sales order and come over here and actually create the purchase order. So you can make that happen automatically within the system, depending upon how you set up that item record, or you can actually do that manually as well. So let's go ahead and generate the purchase order by clicking on this Create PO link here. That'll actually create the purchase order to my GIL Mexico entity. Okay. I can select where that's going to be received and fulfilled from, and then we can save off that transaction. Obviously, if there's any more detail that you want to add to the purchase order, you can certainly do that. Okay, so we've got our sales order and our purchase order created for our mounting brackets. So now we can just come in and go back to our intercompany queue. And now we can see that that purchase order is created. So because we're under a unified platform one system, the folks from the GIL Mexico subsidiary can actually see here that we've got a transaction that we need to address. Okay, so we can come in here, we can select our customer. In this case, it's the U.S. entity who actually generated that the sales order and corresponding purchase order. And we can say, okay, let's go ahead and create our intercompany sales order from that purchase order. So if we select that record, generate the sales order, and that gives us the ability right there from that intercompany purchase order to generate the sales order. If we drill into that sales order, now we can see that we have the linkage that we need. Right? So we've got a sales order that's actually linked to a purchase order. And from there, now that I've got my sales order that's owned by the Mexico entity or subsidiary, we can actually generate our purchase order over to our supplier. Right? So now the Mexico entity is going to generate the purchase order to the supplier. We'll get that product made and that order fulfilled so that we can ultimately fulfill our sales order against our U.S. customer back to 3M. So that process kind of demonstrated the whole intercompany sales order and purchase order process. So as you can see, each one of those transactions were created from an existing hyperlink from the previous transaction. So it really gave us the ability to link those purchase orders and sales orders all the way through the process, tying them all together so we can really see the chain. Okay, so one thing to mention, when you start to introduce multiple subsidiaries within the NetSuite One World environment, there is capability to really put a prefix or to incorporate a subsidiary code within your transaction number. So this gives users the ability to be able to very easily identify when you're generating, like we just did, a couple purchase orders and a couple sales orders that are intercompany, it really gives you the ability to easily identify in lists and other reports who that particular, or which subsidiary that particular transaction actually belongs to. So that's another feature, another setup type functionality for intercompany or NetSuite One World type transactions or configuration. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are several other types of intercompany transactions that can be processed within the application. Those being inventory transfer, intercompany inventory transfers, as well as timesheets and expense reports. I won't go over those today, but you get the feel from just this little bit that we've looked at. There's significant intercompany capability, transactional capability within NetSuite. All right, let's jump back into our slide deck. And move on. So consolidated reporting and KPIs. So talking about just how the reporting aspects and the different types of KPIs and scorecard aspects work within a One World environment. So the nice thing about the way the financial reports and the KPIs work is they can present rolled up hierarchy type reporting, or you can drill down to the individual subsidiaries as well. So again, depending upon your role within the application and what access you have to the different subsidiaries, you're going to see and have different types of information available to you. In this case, we can see we've got an income statement. That income statement can be sliced and diced amongst multiple subsidiaries. Here we have Canada and Mexico, and then the 2 U.S. entities as well. And then we've got it totaled out. So we can look at our income statements, and our financial statements for that matter, in many different ways. In terms of, maybe we want to look at them by subsidiary, or we want to look at them by period from an accounting period perspective, where our columns are really representative of the different periods throughout the fiscal year. So we'll look at that, but lots of different ways you can change the viewing and the formatting of your reports. We also have KPIs within the system, both the scorecard type KPIs as well as different visual meters that will report information either down to the individual subsidiary level or on a rolled up basis. And we can get those KPIs to, we can really get those KPIs to refresh and show different information as we're looking at different subsidiaries. So if I jump back over into NetSuite, we log in as the CFO for the Americas subsidiary. So I'm going to have to come over here and change my role. So let's go down to that Americas CFO role. We have this subsidiary navigator that we were looking at a little bit earlier. So as I interact with the subsidiary navigator, you can see that the different KPI, the portlets KPI meters and ratios, as well as the executive financial portlet over here refreshes based on what I'm seeing or what I'm selecting within the subsidiary navigator. So this is really reflective, these numbers are really reflective of a consolidated report when I'm looking at Gillen whole. If I come over here and I look at the United States, one subsidiary, then those each one of those KPIs and executive financial ratios and formulas, etc., will refresh and show me just the information relative to that particular subsidiary. So lots of good interaction in terms of again, if your permissions allow, good interaction as far as seeing real-time data that's either consolidated or drilled down to the subsidiary level. All right, so let's go in and take a look at some reports here. So if I jump into the Reports menu into Financial, Income Statement. I can get to it that way through the roll right menu. I can also get to it through, I think we've got a navigation portlet down here. So as we saw a little bit earlier, the controller had the navigation portlet. This particular CFO role does as well. So I can also click right on the income statement shortcut there. Okay, so we can actually view the income statement. There's different ways this can be viewed. We can interact with it kind of on a rolled up level, or if we want to see it with a little bit more detail, we can do that, or if we want to see it with a lot more detail, we can certainly go down to the lowest leaf within the report. We can click on certain lines within the report and take us into the actual detail that makes up those balances. So allowing us to really drill down into the detail or view the detail immediately for the entire report. So lots of different ways you can interact with the report just right there from the screen. We can look at it from different periods perspective. So if we launch our filters for the periods, I can actually select different periods. So last year versus this year. Quarterly, a lot of those time dimensions already built into the system, which again allows for just a quick delivery of the information that you're looking for. As we can see here, the subsidiary context that we're looking at is the Americas subsidiary. So again, I can drill down into just the US 1 subsidiary if I wanted to look at just US 1. Or again, we can leave it at a consolidated level. The columns right now is just set to total, but I can slice and dice this report based on those GL reporting dimensions that we and classifications that we looked at a bit earlier. So I can look at the income statement by department, or by class, or by location, or by subsidiary. Right? So if we want to actually see it at the subsidiary level, I can select that, refresh the report, and now my columns will show at the subsidiary level. Okay, if we want to see it at I think I've got the access to be able to see it at a subsidiary hierarchy level, we can look at that too. So now my actual income statement shows the different subsidiaries within the report. Okay, if I want to look at this particular report a bit differently, say from an accounting period perspective, I can change my columns to accounting period and then refresh that report. And now I'm seeing the actual accounting periods. So a lot of other interaction down here and things you can do relative to those reports. I can generate graphical representations of the data, which I can snapshot and put into different reports that I'm producing. I can drop that report right out to Excel. So we go ahead and do that and then launch the report. Probably heard that Excel launch there. And we can see that report coming out from Excel. Okay. All right. So I'm not sure if you were able to see that, if it actually shared or not, but suffice to say that we can actually drop any one of these reports from this interface out to an Excel file. We can also drop it out to PDF, Word, and text, and then we can schedule the reports as well. So if we want to schedule a report and send it out, maybe running it more than once, we can select that particular report, set our schedule. I want to see this report every Wednesday, ending at maybe the end of the year, and then set our recipients. So I can send it to myself, and then we can copy others on that report. So we get an automatic generation of that income statement. We can expand upon the subject, and then set a message body. Any other attachments that we want to send out with that particular report, we can set that, and then save that schedule. So then the report gets automatically distributed. If we're interested in just emailing this report out, we can certainly do that. So just a quick email that I'm going to send out to somebody with a message. I send that email, and then this report actually shows up right in their inbox. And then obviously we can print the report as well. So a lot of different interactions relative to the way your financial statements can be viewed and shared with other individuals. Again, shared only if they have the permissions within the system, or somebody actually sends them that report. Okay, back on the home page, just a little bit more about the different portlets and the available information within those portlets. So you can see that we've got one portlet over here to the left, this KPI portlet. We can actually modify these portlets to present different ranges of data. If we want to compare those ranges in terms of dates. We can add standard KPIs to the list, so we've got several KPIs here. We just have a few on this particular portlet, but several that are available within the system. And then we can actually create custom KPIs as well. So if there's other custom formulas or saved searches or different types of data that you want to present within the present and monitor within the home page, you can certainly create a custom KPI and publish that to your home page. Okay, same thing with ratios and indicators, all those types of different meters that are available. Again, a lot of out-of-the-box type functionality, out-of-the-box meters that are available out of the box. It's just a matter of really configuring your particular home page the way you want it configured. Home pages can also be configured, templatized, and shared out to the user, the particular users within the application, allowing them to change those configurations or perhaps not change those configurations. Maybe you want that consistent home page for a given role and you don't want that to change. Well, you have some control on that as well as an administrator within the system. So again, just a lot of great ways, assuming you've got the permissions to view information across multiple subsidiaries, to really see that information in real time. Okay, so I think that's going to do it today for today's discussion on NetSuite One World. Just kind of recapping, we went through the NetSuite, primarily NetSuite One World type configuration, talked about shared master records, the items, the vendors, the different types of master record tables that we can share and really keep those tables and that data consistent across each one of the subsidiaries within NetSuite One World. Intercompany processing, so we saw some good capabilities relative to the intercompany purchase order and sales order functionality within the application, but there's a lot more there. Again, we can process different project-related time and expense transactions, your typical GL intercompany journal entries, and also some intercompany transactions relative to inventory. So lots of different intercompany functionality, and then looked at consolidated reporting, KPIs, and some of the different options available for just viewing that type of information. So what we spoke of today is, again, primarily NetSuite One World, multi-subsidiary type environment. You don't have to use NetSuite in a One World environment. You can also use it with a single instance, single company. But with the One World environment, you do get a lot of the features that we looked at today in terms of giving you more flexibility within the application. All right, so I appreciate everyone participating today. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Olivia.
Great, thanks so much, Paul, for that very informative presentation. If anyone has any questions or would like additional information pertaining to this NetSuite webinar and any other services we offer here at FMT, please feel free to contact Paul or myself and we will be more than happy to assist you. We appreciate you attending and hope you have a great day. Thanks, everyone.